Persona 3 Reload's episode Aigis just released, and it's doing fine. I've seen a lot of hate going against what's just a DLC expansion to Persona 3's remake, from the price, to the practice done with it, to simply seeing Joker as a secret boss. This thing has been getting endless backlash throughout these past few months, and some have even questioned if it's even worth checking out. So that's why we're here. We originally had a different production in the works, but we've recently been given another great opportunity from our friends at Atlus to review their Persona 3 Reload DLC, episode Aigis. How could we say no to that? In all seriousness, thank you so much to Atlus for providing us with a review code. This production will play out a little differently compared to our Vengeance one, however. Since this DLC was around 20 to 30 hours long, I actually managed to beat it fairly quickly. So instead of talking about my first impressions like last time, we'll be going over the main points of recent criticism while still remaining spoiler-free. Things like the story, the gameplay, the price, and how well it compares to the original. This is one of our first reviews in a very long time, so we'll see if we still got it. Be sure to grab your copy of Persona 3 Reload, cause this is our review on episode Aigis. And as always, before we start, I just want to say that if you're enjoying our productions, or you want to see more Persona-related stuff from us, please be sure to press that subscribe button. And while you're at it, be sure to check out any of our other platforms if you haven't already. And with all that out of the way, let's get started. So, for those who don't know, episode Aigis was originally an epilogue campaign for P3 named The Answer. This was included in its respective release, Persona 3 FES. However, it's now sold separately as part of the expansion pass, which includes it and a couple of other things like extra costumes and music. People were not too happy about this decision. As I mentioned earlier, this DLC was receiving nothing but non-stop backlash from fans. I'll get more into the specifics and my thoughts on this whole situation later, but for now, let's talk about the story. The story follows right after the events of the base game. We just defeated Nyx, but now C's are dealing with the struggles of the death of their leader. For a bit of context, the protagonist, / yourself, sacrificed his life in order to seal off Nyx and preventing the fall for humanity. Even though what he did was very noble, this of course left an empty feeling among the others. This only further creates a problem for them as the game progresses. You see, the story really kicks off when we meet this one other girl named Metis, who tries to kill us, but eventually we see what her true intentions are. She came to see us because we've gotten stuck in this time loop where it's always March 31st, leaving us with no way to see the outside world. This is because of a new area beneath the dorms called the Abyss of Time. The best way to explain this is basically a collection of dungeons that are able to visualize memories of someone's past. So eventually the story becomes a journey to figuring out what's the true cause of all this. I love this story. Despite episode Aigis being a very straightforward narrative, a huge strength it has is with its characters. Let's start with the most notable change. Aigis takes the role of protagonist. This is one of the coolest things I've ever seen in a Persona game. Sure, it's not the first time we've seen a party member take the role of the protagonist, but Aigis is such a charming character. I really liked her in Reload, but she really shines even more here. We see how she struggles with the death of her leader, how she feels meaningless and with no purpose, and how she wants to just give up on everything. I can't imagine how painful and hard it must be for someone like her to have to fill in the role of the leader. The expectations of your party, trying to live up to the same title as he did, they're all things that she's going through, and we see a lot of small moments of the cast mentioning that. What I initially saw as an okay and admittedly cute addition to a very diverse cast has turned into one of my absolute favorite characters in the entire Persona 3 brand. Oh, and don't even get me started on Metis. Even though she literally tried to kill us, she's always just being super supportive and trying to protect Aigis, even going as far as calling Aigis her sister. It's just adorable, and I love the interactions you see Metis have with the main cast. Her personality is very upbeat while still holding her ground when being confronted by the others. Easily among one of the best characters we've seen in these Atlus re-releases if you ask me. But that's not all either. A lot of the C's members also get their fair share of development. We get more exposure to their past and how they became the people they are now. Most notably Yukari getting the most development outside of Aigis and Metis. The whole narrative just keeps this theme of understanding your past in order to move forward. There's even moments where you'll be seeing them at conflict over their personal beliefs. Now I don't want to spoil anything, so I'll just say that while I didn't enjoy the main story of Persona 3 initially, episode Aigis really made me reflect and appreciate these characters more than ever. But even with such a wonderful story that follows well, and heck, make me love a cast of characters more than ever, there's still some major flaws. Not so much with the story itself, but rather how it's being told, which I guess this is a good way to transition over to the gameplay side of things. So let's talk about that. The way episode Aigis plays out is very simple. Instead of one big dungeon to explore, you're given multiple small ones that lead into the story's progression. So as an example, you take one door, and it'll have around 20 floors until you reach the end, where you get to see a flashback of one of the main characters. Keep in mind, however, there's no social links, no calendar, and no real punishment when leaving this little hub area. Overall, it's just a much faster paced version of what exploring Tartarus used to be, which, personally, I don't have a problem with. It helps keep everything focused on the main narrative, while naturally showing us more about our characters through these flashbacks. The problem with this is how far these story segments are spread out. There's around 7 doors you need to get through in order to fully progress the story. At first it was pretty fun since it ranged around 1 to 2 levels that contained around 10 floors, but then after the 3rd one, they made you have to go through 3 levels. This only made exploring the dungeons a lot more tedious, cause you couldn't just skip them without fighting enemies. Reload may be a very easy game, but like any game, it does punish you for not knowing what you're doing. If the dungeons were at least a little bit shorter, heck, maybe even just spread some flashbacks a little better, this wouldn't be as big of an issue. Even though I didn't care about this as much as others, admittedly, the dungeons did feel very tiring to go through. Not to mention you get the same handful of designs as you explore. It's not all bad though. Episode Aigis and Reload do a lot of things that I'm personally really happy for. I plan to make an entire review on Reload itself, so I'll do my best to keep these points brief but clear. For one, I genuinely love the aesthetic. Seeing not only these games, but these worlds with the new art direction is amazing. People have their issues with how it loses its charm, but honestly I've grown to like it. Everything feels much more appropriate for the kind of tone the entire game is aiming for, and it's a treat seeing Aigis and metas like this. Gameplay itself is just your typical dungeon exploring and combat. Use the weaknesses to your advantage to do all-out attacks. One of the biggest addition in Reload, however, are the Aigis. They're essentially an ultimate move any of your party members can make by doing a certain action during a battle, whether it be hitting the proper weakness, healing, or buffing themselves. These are super broken to use, but I really like how flashy and fun these are, and they added some new ones in this DLC which are just as fun to use. As a whole, the gameplay is pretty solid. At the end of the day, it's practically the same kind of combat and systems that were already used in Reload, so there's not much to be said in that regard. Though the overall pacing really does make me see why The Answer as a concept has such a mixed reception. So I guess this brings up a very important topic to be discussed. Does episode Aigis deserve the hate? No. For the most part, at least. It's fair to say that episode Aigis has just been an overall disaster for Atlus these past few months. The Joker cameo, the fact Reload wouldn't have a female protagonist. No joke, at the time of writing this, they recently reposted a remake of the FES intro by utilizing Reload's new cutscenes. Just a small nod to the original release, you know? Yet this was enough to leave a lot of people in flames over how much better the original was. Okay, sure, the original may have had better cinematography and use of the cutscenes, but it's still really cool to see them do this kind of thing. It's all just been an endless amount of hate going against this game all of a sudden. I'll admit, some of the backlash this campaign has received is justified. I made a full production talking about whether or not Atlus should continue this DLC practice moving forward, and to put it simply, I'm completely okay with that. However, it's not okay having to spend $70 on a game and then to spend another $40 for extra content. I'm not even mad about them repackaging The Answer as DLC. I just don't think anyone should be paying this much for it. But at the same time, bombarding its Steam page with this many negative reviews is definitely not the best way to go about this kind of situation. It's only going to give the impression to Atlus that we don't want DLC, and on the other hand, it makes a lot of people hesitant on getting it because of said reviews. The overall situation and place Reload and episode Aigis has found itself in is interesting, to say the least. Now, what does this all mean in the end? Should you play episode Aigis? Well, it depends, honestly. Episode Aigis is a very different experience. It's unlike anything we've seen before in a Persona game, yet it still holds a lot of things that makes it enjoyable. It may not have the social links and calendar system, but it does keep a very engaging and fast-paced gameplay loop for fans of Reload. Even if the dungeons can go on for a bit too long, I'd say the story and characters here are more than strong enough to make it worthwhile. Like I said before, this is my overall favorite part of Persona 3's entire story. Coming from someone who used to hate this game, that's something I never thought I'd be able to say. If you're an overall really big fan of Reload's gameplay and don't mind the changes made here, I definitely do recommend it. If you enjoyed it mostly for the calendar and social link system, I will say I recommend checking it out on Game Pass to see if it's something you could enjoy. At the end of the day, episode Aigis will forever be an experience I'll be holding dear to me. Okay, this is cute and all, but where's my Persona 4 remake, Atlus?